On a freezing winter night, in the middle of a deadly blizzard, a struggling black mechanic spotted a stranger's car stranded on the roadside. Most people would have driven past, but not Marcus. He risked his own safety to save that man's life, never realizing that single act of kindness would return to him in ways he could never imagine. This is not just a story about survival. It's a story about destiny, about how helping one person can transform your entire future. Before we dive in, let me know in the comments where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe so you never miss these life-changing stories. The winter air bit through the town of Cedar Ridge like sharp knives. The wind howled across empty streets, carrying snowflakes that stung the skin. The town was no stranger to snow, but this was different. The radio had already called it one of the worst blizzards in decades. Inside a modest auto repair shop at the edge of town, Marcus Johnson was still working, long after most had locked their doors. His strong hands, stained with oil and grease, twisted the last bolt on a rusty old pickup that had broken down 3 times that month. Marcus leaned back, stretching his aching shoulders. He was 29, tall, with a sturdy frame and the kind of tired eyes that told a story of long nights. Sweat mingled with grease on his forehead, and his dark blue coveralls were dotted with patches from years of labor. He glanced at the clock on the wall. 9:47 p.m. "Another late night," he muttered, pulling off his gloves. His voice echoed in the empty shop, reminding him of how alone he often felt. Marcus's garage wasn't just a workplace. It was his inheritance. His father, Samuel Johnson, had built this shop with his own hands decades earlier. The old man had taught Marcus how to hold a wrench before he could even spell the word engine. But Samuel was gone now, taken too soon by a sudden heart attack the year before. In his absence, Marcus had inherited not only the garage, but also the mountain of debt that came with it. Every day was a battle to keep the lights on. He sighed, wiping his hands on a rag. "Pop, I'm trying," he whispered, glancing at his father's old wrench mounted on the wall like a keepsake. "But it's hard out here." As he stepped outside, the blizzard's fury hit him full force. Snow slammed against his face, and the icy wind cut through his jacket. His old Chevy pickup sat buried under a fresh blanket of snow. Climbing inside, Marcus turned the key, and the truck roared to life. The heater rattled, blowing lukewarm air. On the radio, the announcer's voice crackled. Blizzard warning still in effect. Temperatures dropping rapidly. If you're on the roads, seek shelter immediately. Visibility near zero. Stay safe. Marcus shook his head with a dry chuckle. Shelter. Tell that to the bills waiting on my kitchen table. He put the truck in gear and pulled onto the icy road, unaware that tonight, fate had prepared a storm far greater than the one outside. The roads were almost invisible. Snow swirled in chaotic spirals, erasing the line between ground and sky. Marcus kept his Chevy crawling at a cautious pace, his wipers swishing frantically against the storm's fury. His headlights carved 2 narrow beams through the white curtain. For miles, there was nothing but silence, until something flickered faintly in the distance. At first, Marcus thought his tired eyes were playing tricks on him. But then he saw it again, a pair of weak, blinking red lights. Hazard lights. "Someone's out here," he muttered, narrowing his eyes. Slowing down, Marcus pulled closer. Through the swirling snow, the shape of a black SUV emerged, its nose buried in a drift, its back wheels spinning helplessly in the ice. Marcus pulled over and killed his engine. The icy wind slapped him in the face the moment he stepped out, nearly knocking the breath from his lungs. He trudged forward, boots crunching through knee-deep snow, until he reached the driver's side. Inside, slumped over the steering wheel, was a man. His face was pale, lips tinged blue, his breath fogging the glass weakly. "Hey! Hey! Can you hear me?" Marcus shouted, banging on the window with his gloved hand. The man stirred faintly, his eyes fluttering open just enough to reveal exhaustion. His voice was hoarse, barely a whisper. "Help, please." Marcus yanked at the door, but it was frozen shut. He braced himself and pulled harder until it gave way with a crack. The freezing air rushed inside. The man toppled sideways, and Marcus caught him. His body was stiff, shivering uncontrollably. "Damn, you're ice cold," Marcus muttered, wrapping his spare jacket around the stranger. "Stay with me, man. Don't you dare quit now." Marcus glanced at the SUV. The engine was dead, the fuel gauge on empty. This guy had been stranded for hours. "All right," Marcus said firmly, gripping the man under the arms. "We're getting you out of here." With effort, he half-carried, half-dragged the man back to his Chevy. Once inside, Marcus blasted the heater, though it barely pushed lukewarm air. The man's teeth chattered violently. Hospital. That was the first thought in Marcus's mind. But then reality struck. The nearest hospital was 20 miles away, across narrow mountain roads now buried under blizzard snow. Driving there would be suicide. He looked at the man slumped in the seat beside him. His eyes were closing again, dangerously slow. "No way," Marcus said, shaking his head. "You're not dying on me." He gripped the steering wheel, made a hard decision, and muttered to himself. "My place. It's closer. You'll make it there." With that, Marcus turned the truck around, praying his old Chevy had one more miracle left in it. The drive back to Marcus's place was treacherous. His old Chevy fought the snow like a tired bull, its tires spinning on ice, engine groaning under the strain. Every curve of the road felt like a gamble. But Marcus gritted his teeth and kept going, one eye on the stranger slumped in the passenger seat. The man's breathing was shallow, uneven. His head lolled against the window, his lips a frightening shade of gray. Marcus reached over with one hand, shook his shoulder gently. "Hey, don't check out on me now. Stay awake. Just a little longer, all right." The man groaned faintly, but his eyes fluttered closed again. Marcus clenched the wheel tighter, his knuckles white. "Come on, Chevy. Don't you dare fail me tonight." After what felt like an eternity, the faint outline of his garage appeared through the snow, dim lights glowing in the storm like a beacon. Relief hit Marcus like a wave. He pulled into the lot, slammed the gear into park, and hurried to the passenger side. He lifted the stranger, who was heavier than he looked, and half-dragged, half-carried him inside. Marcus's apartment sat directly above the garage, a small, modest space with peeling wallpaper and a heater that rattled every time it switched on. But tonight, it was the only lifeline. "All right, buddy, you're safe now," Marcus muttered as he lowered the man onto his worn-out couch. He kicked the heater into overdrive, grabbed every blanket he owned, and wrapped the stranger like a cocoon. Then he ran to the kitchen, filled an old kettle with water, and set it on the stove. The whistle echoed minutes later, and he poured steaming water into a chipped mug. Returning to the couch, Marcus carefully lifted the man's head and pressed the mug to his lips. "Here, sip this." Slowly. The man's eyes flickered open, cloudy and disoriented. He took a weak sip, coughed, then managed another. The warmth seemed to spark something inside him. His shivers slowed, His breathing steadied just a little. "There you go," Marcus said softly. "That's it. You'll be all right." For the next hour, Marcus stayed by his side, rotating hot water bottles and checking his pulse like he had done it all his life. He wasn't a doctor, but he knew enough about cold and engines, and tonight, a human body was just another engine that needed heat to keep running. At one point, the stranger whispered, his voice raspy, almost inaudible. "You saved my life." Marcus shook his head firmly. "Nah. I just did what anyone with a heart would do." But deep down, Marcus knew that wasn't true. Plenty of people would have driven past. Not everyone would risk themselves in a blizzard for someone they didn't know. Hours dragged on. The storm outside battered the windows, but inside, warmth slowly returned. The man finally slipped into a deep, steady sleep, his chest rising and falling with more strength. Marcus leaned back in the armchair beside him, exhausted. His eyes went to the wrench on the wall again, the one that had belonged to his father. "Pop," he murmured. "I hope I did right tonight." The storm outside raged on, but inside, Marcus had made a choice, a risky one, but the only one his conscience would allow. Morning sunlight broke through the blinds, spilling warm light across the small apartment. The storm had passed, leaving a heavy silence that seemed almost unreal after the night's chaos. Marcus stirred awake in the armchair, his head tilted back, a blanket draped over him. His eyes snapped open at the sound of movement. The stranger on the couch groaned softly and sat up, rubbing his temples. He looked around the modest apartment, peeling paint, cluttered counter, a framed photo of Marcus and his late father, before his eyes settled on Marcus. "You're alive," Marcus said with a tired grin. "Guess my couch isn't as bad as it looks." The man let out a weak laugh, his voice still raspy. I owe you more than you know." Marcus shrugged. "Just did what anyone would have done." He moved toward the small stove, where the smell of fried eggs filled the air. "You eat eggs?" "It's about all I can offer." The man nodded gratefully. "Anything warm will do." Over breakfast, 2 eggs each, burnt toast, and weak coffee, they finally exchanged names. "Marcus Johnson," the mechanic said, extending a grease-stained hand. The man smiled faintly as he shook it. "Edward Sterling." Marcus didn't react. To him, it was just a name. He didn't follow the business world, didn't know the weight it carried. "So, what brought you out here in the middle of a blizzard, Mr. Sterling?" Marcus asked between bites. Edward sipped his coffee thoughtfully. "Business trip. I was trying to make it back to the city before the storm hit, but, clearly, I miscalculated." Marcus chuckled. "Yeah, well, storms around here don't forgive bad timing." They talked for nearly an hour. Marcus told him about the garage, how his father built it, how the debts were suffocating him. He didn't sugarcoat it, but he didn't complain either. It was just the truth of his life. Edward listened intently, his sharp eyes studying Marcus with a mix of respect and curiosity. Finally, when Edward stood to leave, he slipped a sleek business card onto the table. "You saved my life, Marcus. If you ever need anything, anything at all, call me." Marcus picked it up, nodding politely. "Sure thing. But honestly, I didn't do it for payback." Edward smiled. "That's exactly why I mean it." As the SUV was towed away later that day, Marcus figured he'd never see Edward Sterling again. Life went on, and with it came the same struggles. Business at the garage was slow. The snow kept customers away, and the bills kept stacking higher. One evening, Marcus sat at his workbench, staring at an overdue notice from the bank. His chest tightened. The shop that carried his father's name, the shop that was his entire life, was slipping away. He pressed his palms to his face and whispered, "I can't lose this, Pop. Not like this." His eyes drifted to the business card, still pinned to the fridge with a magnet. Edward Sterling. For weeks, Marcus had ignored it. He wasn't the type to beg. He didn't trust handouts. But tonight, his pride was outweighed by desperation. With trembling fingers, he picked up the card and dialed the number. To his surprise, the call was answered almost instantly. Marcus. The voice on the other end was warm, familiar. Marcus blinked. "You remember me?" "Of course," Edward said. "I've been waiting for you to call." The next week, Marcus drove to the city, his truck rumbling down the freeway. He felt out of place among towering skyscrapers and polished cars, but something in his gut told him this meeting mattered. He parked near a massive glass tower that gleamed in the sunlight. The sign read, "Sterling Industries." Inside the lobby, he was greeted by Edward himself, dressed in a tailored suit, looking far stronger and sharper than he had on that snowy night. Marcus froze. "Wait, this is yours? You're that Sterling?" Edward smiled gently. "Yes. CEO, owner, and a man alive today because of you." Marcus's mouth went dry. I had no idea." Edward guided him into a spacious office with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. "That's what I admire about you. You helped me without knowing or caring who I was. You saw a man in need. That's rare, Marcus." Marcus shifted uncomfortably. "Look, I didn't call to cash in on anything. My garage is dying. It was my dad's dream. I can't let it die, but I can't save it alone." Edward leaned back in his chair, studying Marcus thoughtfully. Then he said, "I don't believe in coincidences. You saved my life, Marcus. Now, I want to help you live yours." Edward didn't just write a check. That wasn't his style. Instead, he offered Marcus a partnership. Sterling Industries would invest in rebuilding the garage into a state-of-the-art facility, but Marcus would run it. His name, his leadership, his dream. At first, Marcus resisted. He didn't want to lose control of his father's legacy. But Edward reassured him. "This will always be your garage, Marcus. I just want to give you the tools to make it thrive." Months later, the transformation was complete. Where once stood a run-down shop, now stood a gleaming modern garage with the sign Johnson and Sterling Auto Repair glowing proudly in neon blue. The community flocked back. Jobs were created, young apprentices trained, and Marcus was no longer the struggling mechanic working alone late at night. He was a leader, a mentor, a man living his father's dream. On opening day, as the town gathered to celebrate, Marcus stood before the new sign, his heart swelling. He whispered softly, "We made it, Pop. We made it." Behind him, Edward clapped a hand on his shoulder. "See, Marcus, sometimes saving a stranger isn't just about them. Sometimes it's the start of saving yourself." Marcus smiled, tears in his eyes. Guess kindness really does come full circle. The blizzard was long gone, but its memory lingered, not as a storm that nearly ended one life, but as the night that changed two lives forever. This story proves something powerful. Kindness is never wasted. One act, even in the darkest storm, can open doors you never imagined. If you believe kindness always finds its way back, type "Kindness wins" in the comments. And don't forget, like, share, and subscribe for more inspiring stories every week.